Hi guys, welcome to what I'm hoping to be a mini lesson. I'm going to try to keep this one to 5 minutes, but I think there's some really important stuff in here. So today we're going to talk about the importance of introductions and conclusions. This is minus very many examples because you need to figure out how to do this in your own voice and in your own way, but not doing these things is really detrimental to the quality of your writing. So let's get started. First of all, introductions and conclusions are often passed off by students as unimportant. Oh, well, my introduction, I just need to get all the typical stuff out of the way, get my thesis in there, and move on. And conclusions, well, okay, I'm done with the paper. I just want to be done. I'll write a couple of sentences just to make it feel like it's right, and then I'll move on from there. This is a huge problem with tons of people's papers, and it totally turns off teachers when they see that these really important parts of the paper have been overlooked or just given short shrift. So here are things that you need to figure out how to do in your own writing so that you're not making the teacher angry at you for not paying attention to these important parts of your paper. First of all, remember that your introduction is your teacher or your reader, your audience's first impression of you as a person, as a writer, as a thinker, and first impressions are lasting impressions. If you give a bad first impression, then that's going to follow you throughout the rest of the paper. No matter how good the rest of the paper is, the teacher is going to remember, well, they didn't care about the introduction, so why wasn't the introduction as good as this? So what you need to do is you need to figure out how to make your audience want to keep reading. The introduction, the fact that we call that first part the hook is because it gets the audience hooked in and they want to keep going. If the introduction makes them want to stop, then you haven't done your job. The second thing that you need to do is not tell your audience what they already know. Why are you filling me in on information that I already know? Especially if the teacher has given you the prompt, why are you repeating the prompt? Find another way to fill the audience in on the things that they need to know in order to understand your argument, not the things that they already know. Don't repeat what's already been said or common knowledge. Fill them in on new stuff. Third, trivia and background, this is related to the previous one, are not equal. You can't just say, well, I need to say something about my topic, so here's a few facts. Background is going to give the audience the key information that they need in order to understand the argument that you're going to make or the topic you're going to cover in depth. So do not trivialize by just listing off a whole bunch of random stuff. Make sure that you're only talking about the things that are important. Lastly, technical perfection is absolutely essential, which means that you have got to make sure that that first paragraph is exactly right, that you're not doing anything wrong, no spelling errors, no punctuation errors or grammar errors, because again, it's your first impression. We will be way more forgiving of you in the rest of the paper if we don't start off seeing a bunch of bad stuff going on in the first paragraph. Similarly with final paragraphs or conclusions, that's the last thing that we see before we turn your paper over, right? Like before we move on to the next one. And if you leave us with a sour taste in your mouth because you didn't do a good job on it, then that's the last impression that we have of you as a writer. And you don't want to do that either because those last impressions um, are bad for bad for your reputation. So here are things that you need to remember. Number one, don't make it feel in those last couple of sentences that we regret having read the paper. Don't make it feel like you regretted having written the paper and that it was just something you just wrote this sentence before, or these couple of sentences because you had to. It has to feel like it's a cohesive and meaningful part of your paper. Second, you cannot repeat what you've already said. Do not run over your main points again and again and again. Revisit it, sure. Don't repeat it. it needs to be said in a way that's adding substance to your paper. Not new information, but substance. Your audience has already read the paper. They know your main points. Don't repeat your main points. It's boring. Make the audience feel as though what you proved is somehow useful and meaningful. Take what you proved in the paper and make the audience believe that they have gained something from having read your paper. Fake it if you have to, although hopefully you don't have to. Lastly, technical perfection again is absolutely essential. You've got to get everything right in that last paragraph. If you get lazy in the last paragraph, our last impression of you is that you are lazy. Don't do it. One last thing, I know I'm running longer than 5 minutes, but this is essential. Titles. Titles, titles can destroy a reader's expectations. If you have a bad title, then we're already out before we've even read your paper. If you say this paper's title is Rhetorical Analysis or AP Lang paper or Groucho Marx letter, final draft, whatever you're saying, that is terrible. I don't want to read those papers. I know that's what this paper is already. It does nothing for me. Good titles titillate your audience. They make the audience want to read that first, or the whole paper, really. So these two examples are referencing the Groucho Marx letter to the Warner Brothers from the textbook section called Writing a Close Analysis Essay. If you haven't read that yet, you'll need to make sense of that by going there. However, I'm still going to use them as creative examples of titles. So if you are writing a rhetorical analysis paper about that letter, you could use this title, X Marks the Spot, a rhetorical map to vengeance. You've got some wordplay in there. Marx, you've got the word Marx, but it's also playing off of the word, the name of the author of the letter, the person whose rhetoric you're analyzing. It implies a metaphor that you might use, the map to vengeance. It implies the meaning of the letter. It implies what you're going to be proving in your paper. It's also fun and interesting and makes me want to read more. Second, Winning the Warner War, a rhetorical guide to conquering a city, references the argument that you're going to make. It references the writer of the letter that you're going to be analyzing. It's got some fun wordplay in there, Winning the Warner War. It implies battle and intrigue and things like that. It makes me want to go forward with this. Even before I've read your introduction, I'm a little bit excited. Remember these. Oh, one last thing, sorry, and then I'll wrap up. Remember, notice also that there's a title and a subtitle, and typically the papers that you write should have a title and then a subtitle, a title that's a little bit maybe more fanciful, and then a subtitle that kind of clarifies what you're going to be proving in the paper. Remember these pieces of advice as you're writing your papers, otherwise you're playing with the idea that the teacher is going to be in a foul mood as they're analyzing and evaluating what you've done.